So today I'm here with Jennifer from Florida
Yes.
in America, Jennifer's using the inquiry-based stress reduction process within organizations. So welcome, Jennifer, and thank you for joining me today. So
Thank you.
can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you're using the work in organizations?
Sure. So my background is in education, and so I came to really see that educating professionals, whether it be staff in nonprofit organizations or in schools or in small businesses, really doing training and professional development trainings was something that I started doing about 5 years ago, and just loved it and saw that the difference that it made in the employees' communication and rapport, conflict resolution, productivity. All of that were the results of the trainings that I was doing. And then I found out about the work of Byron Katie right around that time, and it personally helped me to improve my relationship with my family, with my kids, and then also professionally in my own workplace. And so just being able to do that self-reflection for myself was something that I started to incorporate into my trainings. And it was even more powerful in terms of the staff being able to see each other's perspectives. That was a huge result from this work, and just opening up a space for them to be able to talk to each other in a way that they couldn't really even see before. So I came to it from kind of a training perspective, from an education perspective, and then seeing how it helped with groups versus just one-on-one, work. So.
And so how do you introduce it, or, how do you use it with how you incorporated it into what you've got, how you introduce it to people?
Yeah, so I mostly introduce it in talking about the relationship between thoughts, feelings, actions, and then the result that we get, right? So just basing it solely on someone gives an example of a stressful situation, and obviously we all have them 1,000 times a day, right? So that's easy, and then it could be at work or it could be at home, but they give that example of a stressful situation, and then we go through those components. So what were you thinking? And then what were you feeling? And then they get to see the relationship between, at the end, what they had most of the time was conflict and stress and upset and, days and days of just being stuck.
Yeah.
And they could see that just came from their thoughts and their mind. And so we really start kind of with the basics there. And then people start to get it, like, okay, now it's about me. And it's an interesting shift, because they go into the workshop a lot of times thinking, oh, we're going to talk about tips and techniques on how to communicate or how to reduce stress. And we start right off the bat with, what were you thinking? Not what did the other person do to you?
Yeah.
And it's a non-threatening way as well, because it's not anyone pointing fingers, but it's the person, him or herself, really being able to write down for themselves what they were thinking and feeling, and then how that affected the reaction. And so I put it in those terms, which everyone gets right away. So that's how I introduce it. And then we go into taking, again, one person's situation and working through the 4 questions and turnarounds, based on the work of Byron Katie, and then being able to see how they can work through that stress, and that they really can, each person can do the work to get through that. And again, just focusing on him or herself. And it's really, really powerful in the dynamics of a group for everyone to work on themselves.
Yeah. And so do you have any follow-up at all with the people or participants that have been in your workshops?
I have had some. Most of my trainings recently have been just once or twice, but I have had one group that I've worked with over a couple months. And I started with about 20 of them, and then we did smaller groups. And it was amazing how when I did follow up, they had a lot of questions because it takes practice.
Yeah.
I always say, like, it's not a magic wand, right? Like Katie says, it's not this, now everything's fine and there's no more conflict, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so they're able to practice it, and then kind of, a lot of times people want solutions, they want to know. So they'll come back maybe a month later or even 2 weeks later and say, well, I did the work on this situation. I could find the turnarounds, but now what should I do? So, what is a solution to this? And so we do talk about those living turnarounds, and, let's look at some of those barriers. And now that you've, done the work and really worked through, kind of seeing what you were thinking and how you reacted, et cetera, what with the turnarounds, what could be a living turnaround? What are specific actions that you could do that you a lot of times wanted the other person to do, right? Like with those turnarounds, we see that where our responsibility is. And anyway, so those follow-ups have been really powerful. And then even following up again to see what solutions they put into place and how those relationships have been able to be built. And what comes out of it a lot of times is just a lot of honesty.
Yeah.
That wasn't there before, and that culture of being honest with one another and saying, this is how I'm feeling and thinking about this, and let's do a worksheet on each other, or let's work. I'd like to tell you I did the work on this, and I'd like to tell you what came out of it for me.
Yeah.
And having that space and that culture of just being more honest rather than kind of stuffing everything down, or just having that conflict and then we're avoiding each other, because that seems to happen a lot, right? Like, well, I'm just not going to talk to that person anymore in the office because it's uncomfortable and I don't like them anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it brings them back together and gives them a shared language to be able to work through a lot of that conflict, which is really powerful. So it's been great.
Great. Well, the shared language is an interesting thing, isn't it? And that's where I think Tim spoke to me about that shared language that's then used within the organisation. Oh, and Alicia did too, because Alicia's noticed she started with the employees at the lower level, and now the managers want a piece of it because they've heard this language that's being used and noticed the changes, and so it's like they're now interested in understanding it. So have you worked with which levels in the organisation do you usually work with?
I've mostly worked with employees and teachers in schools. And then I have worked with a few leadership teams of really small organizations where it's like 3 or 4 people in the whole organization because it's a very small business, or an entrepreneur who has 3 or 4 people on their team.
Mm-hmm.
So I have experienced that. Like, for example, in the school, the teachers will, start collaborating more. And so the administration will see that and notice and say, wow, we see a lot more collaboration with parents of the teachers' kids and the teachers themselves. So that was some feedback that I did receive. And then in one of the trainings that I just recently did, it was for factory workers actually. And yeah. And so there was a lot of stress around how much money they were making, you know, providing for their family. That was interesting. And then, but also within the organizations, how the administration or how the people who were, you know, their bosses were treating them or how they perceive that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of work around that. And then I was able to meet with the supervisors and kind of talk about that. And again, in a non-threatening way, to just say, you know, this is kind of introduce that same concept of these are the beliefs of the people, some of the people that are working for you. And it helped them just to see their perspective. And that just opens up, again, you know, such a space for just more understanding and more compassion.
Yeah.
You know, rather than that just like kind of like, oh, why aren't they doing their job? Or, you know, why are they coming late? You know, and it's like just opens up that space of like seeing other people's perspectives, which is such a amazing shift for a lot of organizations and being able to work together and be more productive.
Yeah. And it's been really interesting, that dichotomy between what's work and what's home. You know, the things that are stressing us from home that we bring to work, and the fact that we don't always just leave work at work when we leave work and go home, you know, is we take our stress from each place with us wherever we go. And so, yeah. Did you notice that too?
I did. And especially within this particular group, which, there was a lot of stress and coming from home that they were bringing to work in particular. And so you could see how that was affecting, you know, their beliefs about their work environment, which when they actually were able to, you know, a lot of times just to get employees or participants in the workshops to even write down their thoughts, sometimes is difficult because they are not used to even being aware of their thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So in this particular case, you know, when we were able to just kind of work through, like, what are you thinking? They realized that a lot of their stress was coming from them just being worried about being able to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And that was affecting their productivity, which is, you know, the irony is if you're more productive, you could possibly make more money and then pay the bills.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that was really cool to see where the light bulb went off for them. So, you know, it was like, and what this, and, you know, what's so amazing to me about the work is, you know, it's like you just get it for yourself, and each person really gets it. And it's not anyone telling them, you know, be more productive because then you can make more money. I mean, they just like, the light bulb goes off like, oh my gosh, this worry is actually keeping me from being more productive and making more money.
Yes.
And so it's just, so that, to your point, you know, their stress about home and family and bills and such was, you know, permeating into the workplace. And, but just being able to get to those underlying beliefs and then working through those is just so powerful. You know, you really get to see what is going on within me, you know, and it creates that ability to then, you know, just have space for solution or just peace, you know, so it's great.
Well, and I think the other thing that I'm noticing is that flow and effect that we know happens, that it might only take one group that's done this self-inquiry and started to change and shift the way they do things, and yet, like you've mentioned, it has a broader impact across an organization. People will see the difference in the way people interact, the way people collaborate, the way people speak to each other, you know, how they work, how they approach others. And so it does have a very big flow-on effect with even only one group initiating being into doing it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do think that, and one of my goals for, the near future is to do more follow-ups, because it definitely is something that it takes practice, and people always want more. They're like, this is amazing, and I got so much out of just this 3-hour training. I would love to have more practice. So I agree with you that having those follow-ups, if that's possible, is really important especially to change the culture of an organization, or to make it more broad for everyone there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing with me how you've been using this process, the work in organizations. And it sounds like it's been really valuable for the employees, for any of the organizations that you've worked with. And so I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it. I always love sharing it and hearing from other people how they're doing it as well. So it's really great. And it really just has so many applications. Pedro, I was talking with him. He does the work in business, as you know, and he just said, it's infinite applications in terms of every aspect of life and work. And so, yeah, it's really exciting to see all the ways that it can be applied and really make a difference in our world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.